Today I'm having coffee with my old buddy Garrett Keast. Garrett and I met over 15 years ago in New York City when we were both trying to get our careers started. And since then he's conducted orchestras all over America and all over the world, including the Opera Nationale de Paris, Gewandhaus Orchestra in Leipzig, the NDR Symphony Orchestra, the Rundfunk Symphony Orchestra Berlin, and lots of others. I'm going to call him up in Berlin and see what he's doing right now. Hey, Garrett, how are you doing?
Hey there, Silas. Good to see you.
Long time no see. I'm racking my brain what year it was the last time we saw each other. It was probably in New York City.
Certainly, yeah. What? '08?
I left New York in 11. When did you leave New York?
Also in 11.
Yeah, so it must have been right before then.
Yeah.
And now you're in Berlin now, and I think it's pretty late in the evening, but you're still nursing something over there. I've got my daily espresso.
Well, it's not coffee time anymore, but I've got a little tea here.
Great. Well, so you've been doing a lot of stuff since the last time I talked to you. I feel like that we have a lot of things to catch up on.
It's cool. It's cool that that we're catch up because like you were reminding me that you're from San Antonio and I'm from Houston originally, and I know we both had connections to Austin at some point because Round Rock, I remember your orchestra there. I think
That's
you
right.
founded it.
And I did, yeah. And then you were a student at UT, I guess.
A long time ago, yes. And
but we met in New York City when we were both kind of at the beginning of our careers trying to figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And you were amazing because you were really making it happen with your, what was the name of your orchestra again?
It was the Astoria Symphony, which I'm still kind of working with them a little bit, but.
Yeah, but that's a coffee place.
Astoria? Yeah.
Astoria, I always think of that's a real, in New York, I always think that's a cool coffee place with the Turkish coffee. It's Turkish coffee. What is it?
Well, it's a big Greek community there, so there's a lot of Greek coffee. And by the way, Greek coffee and Turkish coffee are virtually the same thing, but don't tell Greek people and Turkish people that.
Right. It's very, yeah. I remember having it there a few times. I remember going to some special cafe with somebody, maybe you, I don't know who, but it was. And I used to work at the Queen Symphony Orchestra, which way back in the day, which was great for me at the time. And
yeah, wow,
it's a small world.
No, when we would hang out from time to time in New York, it wasn't really pertinent at the time. So when we were setting up this meeting today, I mentioned to you that I'd lived in Berlin once because I lived in Berlin actually before I met you. And now, of course, you're living in Berlin. You've been there for a couple of years, I think.
We've been here since 11.
I hope you're living better in Berlin than I was because I was a poor student and I lived in like a tiny one-room flat for $100 a month in Moabit.
Wow. In Moabit. Wow. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And I don't know what Moabit is like now. I haven't been to Berlin in a few years, but when I was there, it was the mostly Turkish/Muslim neighborhood. And it was really, all my neighbors are really friendly, but I kind of stuck out like a sore thumb.
Well, I'm sure you did. Yeah.
But
it's a nice area. I mean, I think it's probably, certainly I would say gentrified, but it's also very big Turkish community still on the northern side of that area.
Yeah.
We used to live near there. When I first started in Berlin, I was at Deutsche Oper Berlin. And so it wasn't so far from there, directly kind of west of there, I guess. And I remember I could ride. We used to live in Mierendorfplatz, and when I'd take my bike to like Hauptbahnhof or something like that, I'd go right through Moabit, along the river and everything,
Yeah.
Yeah,
fantastic. Where do you live now? Kreuzberg or someplace west?
No, now we live east. We live in Prenzlauer Berg.
Oh, Prenzlauer Berg. It's really nice.
Yeah.
I could see in 2002 was when I lived there. It was a really long time ago. But in 2002, it was not that nice, but you could see that it was going to be the place to be. It was like the Astoria of Berlin.
Oh, I could see that. Yeah. I've heard that we've now lived here 5 years, this area, but I've heard that even 10 years ago, it looked a lot different. Yeah. And it used to be really funky and clubs and
yeah. It was really fun. It was like the young people would go hang out. There were all these underground nightclubs and bars, and there was like a communist bar that was their bragging thing. Like, we're the communist bar. Every drink cost the same price, and everybody would go there and order beers. And I'd be like, "You all are crazy. I'm getting some Glenfiddich."
Oh, right, sure. That's funny.
You're all subsidizing my expensive liquor taste. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
funny,
yeah,
funny.
cool. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that's cool that you were here. That's amazing.
Now, do you have a you work with a lot of groups in Berlin and all around Europe, so Berlin must be a great place to be stationed.
I mean, it's an amazing place to be kind of, yeah, based. I mean, you know, I used to get engaged to do something in Berlin with one of the orchestras or something every other year or every year or something. Usually every season there's something in Berlin, but you know, I mostly work, gosh, all over the place in Europe, and I really love it. I mean, I think it's really a great place for an American, you know, to try to make a name for themselves. You know, this is what I always say to soloists and other young conductors and stuff is like, it's good to be, and composers too. It's good to be a foreigner. In our business, it's good to be a foreigner.
Yeah, I could see that when I was there as a lowly student, and then when I moved in 2002, I moved from Berlin to New York City, and then we met shortly after that. But then I spent the next couple of years like trying to get back to Berlin, but without a student visa. And in that early part of my career, I wasn't able to get work, and I couldn't make that transition back. How did that work for you? How did you go from being a young guy trying to figure out how to be a conductor to living in Berlin?
Oh gosh, well, I mean, it's a lot of components to that, but I mean, it's kind of amazing. You know, for me, I must say it is rather a dream come true. I mean, I was this kid that grew up in Houston. I went to school in Austin. I went back to Houston because there was an opportunity to study at the Houston Symphony there with my old teacher, Stephen Stein, who was the assistant conductor there, was a resident conductor there. And then Eschenbach was music director there at the time. And it was an amazing period for the orchestra, very late 90s. And so I spent some years in Houston, kind of getting my experience, just being around a great orchestra, around great musicians, and then moved off to New York. And so I've kind of always been of the mindset, like, go to New York, you know, find a way to make a career there, get started really there, because, you know, where it's bigger than New York City in the States. I mean, that's it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's where you can meet a lot of people and network and find the next steps. And then I kind of felt like after 6, 7, 8 years in New York, around 2008, I remember I called up Craig Urquhart, who was my old friend from the Bernstein office. And I said, Craig, I want to talk to you because I know you live in Berlin half the time. And I'm thinking I got to get to Berlin because I was kind of tired. I was that young professional conductor on the kind of circuit conducting education concerts, pop summer concerts. You know, I was director of education and of the Queen's Symphony. I did all kinds of stuff like that. I went to the Oregon Symphony doing education concerts. I went to the Florida Orchestra and Syracuse Symphony, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, I want to get out of this. I want to move on. And I was conducting small opera companies. And Craig helped me I mean, we worked together, and I hired him as my consultant, basically. And he helped introduce me to a lot of people in Europe. And eventually I got to assist Eschenbach at Paris Opera, and that really helped move some things along because it went well somehow, and some good fortune there. And then got I got some auditions, and I got some jump-ins, and then I got that job at Deutsche Oper Berlin, which is super helpful. So that's the long and short of it. But it's kind of amazing, you know.
Now, I know that you assisted Eschenbach a couple of times. Did your relationship begin with him in Houston, or did you only start working with him later?
I mean, I was kind of a student of his or understudy of his in Houston, and he knew me, of course, and we talked, and sometimes they asked me to assist in some way or shape or form on a recording or something, but I was kind of, so I knew him and everything, but I kind of, in New York is where I kind of started building a resume. And so, you know, luckily, Craig really reintroduced me to him properly, which took a lot of time, a lot of effort. I mean, there was a lot of Philadelphia Orchestra concerts in the Carnegie Hall where Craig was like, come with me right now. We're going to go backstage and say hello again. And Christoph, of course, remembered me, but Craig was very diligent about saying, hey, he's a real conductor now. He can actually conduct. He's done very well. He did this and this and this. I was in New York City Opera, blah, blah, blah. So somehow, and he convinced him to take me as assistant on a big production in Paris, and that kind of helped get it going. But yeah, I assisted him now like 20 times on lots of different productions or different things. So,
but I think right unless I'm mistaken, right now you don't hold a post in Berlin. So is there
No,
anything? Do you? No.
no.
So what's keeping you in Berlin? Why not Vienna or Dresden or London? Why Berlin?
Oh, Berlin's the best. I
Yeah.
can't think of
Okay.
any place better to be than Berlin. I mean, I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be than Berlin. I mean, there's no bigger music city. No, it's by far the biggest. It's bigger
Right.
than Vienna. It's bigger than London. There's more professional orchestras, the more opera companies.
Yeah.
Um, and
And
it's
it's a cool
cheaper.
town. It's
It's
super cool
cooler.
town. Yeah. I tell you what, if I had the opportunity to live in Berlin and do what you're doing right now, I would jump at it. But my dream city is Paris. I love Paris, and I would love to live there. But you're right. As far as music cities go, in maybe in Europe, maybe in the world, Berlin is it, capital of
I
music.
think Berlin's more than anywhere else. People often overlook it and think Vienna or think Paris or London or something. I mean, it's light years beyond New York. I mean, truly. I mean, New York has now only the Metropolitan Opera and New York Philharmonic. There's no other full-time orchestra there, really. That's it.
There's a couple of smaller organizations, yeah.
Well,
And
there's
then
lots of smaller ones, but there's not like, here there's 5 symphony orchestras and 3 opera orchestras. And
right, yeah,
yeah. I mean, it doesn't have that in Vienna, doesn't have that. And Vienna's amazing, don't get me wrong. I love to work in Vienna. I love to work in Paris too. My God.
yeah. So you were recently in Finland, and I think you do a lot of traveling around Europe like that.
Yeah, well, luckily I got to go because everything's canceled basically. But
So why
Finland,
were you able to do that? Why were they not closed there? What are they doing well?
they have very, very low count of corona cases,
Uh-huh.
and they take it very, very seriously. And they had just extremely low numbers, but it's a small country too. I mean, it's a very large country land-wise, but it's only 6 million people in the whole country.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a little isolated, I think.
Mm-hmm. Did you have to do anything special, any quarantine, or did you have to get there and then wait some time or take a test or anything?
Yeah, I did. Actually, it was crazy because I was supposed to arrive there, I think, on October 15 or something like that, to start rehearsing at the opera there for this ballet at Jekyll and Hyde. I was conducting a new production of this new world premiere piece, and it was kind of crazy because they were like, they called me suddenly on the phone from the offices there, and it was like the orchestra manager, the administrator, and like the producer of the ballet, and they all called. They called me on a to make sure I took it seriously, I guess. So they really wanted me to come suddenly sooner. They wanted me to come instead of the 15th, come of October, 27th of September, because Germany was about to become a red country for Finland, which would have meant I would have had to arrive and quarantine 2 whole weeks, even with a negative test.
Oh, so they said, why don't you just go ahead and come now? And
yeah.
Wow.
So that was great because then I got there that a good bit early, but I could start being in the rehearsals. But I only had to quarantine for about 24 hours before my negative test came back, and then I could go anywhere, and it was fine.
Yeah, great. Did life look more or less normal there? I know that here in the States we're doing our shutdown thing. It's different in every state, of course, but in Berlin you're experiencing the second big shutdown. So how is life in Finland right now?
I mean, now they're kind of shut down too. Now, unfortunately, we did 10 performances. We were supposed to do 14.
Okay.
The last 4 were canceled. I would have been home only a week ago, but instead I've been home 2 weeks.
Okay.
And so the last 4 were canceled, but because they had increasing numbers like everywhere else, but still very low compared to the rest of Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Norway and Finland are doing the best.
Yeah, it makes sense. Far north and low population density. Makes sense.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
I know that you're probably following the news in the States, and it's crazy because every state does a different thing, and then there's a spike in this state and not in that state, and some states have masks and some don't, and it's insanity.
Here, I mean, Germany it's kind of funny because I keep looking at Germany versus Texas, because that's my first inclination is to check how Texas is doing versus Germany. It's not doing very well.
No, it's like the
I hate to say it. I hate to do it. Just it's doing really badly. They have a much smaller population and a much higher death number and the case count. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, but
I promised you that we wouldn't talk about controversial stuff, but since both of us from Texas, we have friends and family there. I assume, like me, you have people that they're taking it seriously, and some that are not. And I
yes, and
think,
I keep telling some of them, like, take it seriously.
yeah, I think if you don't know someone who's had it, or don't know someone who's been hospitalized, or you don't know someone who's died, it's really easy to say it's not that big a deal. But you and I know a lot of people on the East Coast where it was really bad in the spring, and we probably both know people who passed. And so
I certainly do.
when my people in Texas just are traveling around and gathering for Thanksgiving and stuff, it makes me crazy.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's yeah. Well, anyway, I hope it's. I don't think we've said anything controversial anyway. So
No, I care about my people. I want them to be well.
yeah, I mean, in New York, I lost a very close friend, older friend, but she's now gone. It's sad, but it is kind of amazing because it's like I feel like my life's kind of continuing pretty normally in a way. I mean, it's not because I'm not working a lot as much, but I've had a lot of time to think and work on different plans, and it's been really helpful actually.
So your stint in Finland got cut a little bit short, and I'm assuming a lot of other projects that would have happened were canceled. But what are you doing with your extra time?
Well, I mean, it's been great. One thing is great. I have two little boys. I don't even know if you know that. I have 2.5-year-old and a 5.5-year-old.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see things on Facebook.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we had a lot of time together in the spring and the summer, and that was great. Um, and it's I mean, living here in Berlin where we are, it's like the parks are amazing. The summer, the best thing about the shutdown in the spring is the weather was fabulous. It was cool, clear day after day after day after day for like 2 months. It was amazing. So I mean, for me, mostly though, I had a lot of time. I have a little office right here. I am down the street from my house, and so I came over here most days during the week for 3 or 4 hours and had some time to think and work and work on. I really worked on repertoire and programming and kind of refocus my efforts towards American music, which is really one of my real passions. So and it's something I get asked to do a lot in Europe because when you're the American in Europe, it makes sense. Well, we want to do this program of Bernstein. Maybe we ask Garrett to do it.
Mm-hmm. Is the assumption that I mean, I know the answer to this already, but the assumption is, he's American. He's going to be better at American music than somebody else is. And do you think that's true?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, then it would follow that only a German conductor could be invited to conduct Brahms, right?
That is the case.
Is that what management thinks in European orchestras, in your opinion?
Certainly, yes.
Interesting.
I remember one of my agents saying, "Oh yeah, so and so, French conductor on the roster. Oh, he always gets asked to do La Mer like everywhere he goes." And he's tired of it,
I'll bet. Yeah. I mean, I love conducting La Mer and I love conducting American music, but it would annoy me if I got sort of typecast as like the Bernstein guy or the Copland guy.
Well, I think it's okay. There's a lot of great American music. I don't think it doesn't. I think I used to think that way too, but I kind of opened my mind up now a little more because I kind of realized that that it's actually okay because I still will get asked to do those things,
Mm-hmm.
And I shouldn't really. And when you're in Germany and there's talking to German orchestras, you really can't fight the whole. Okay, let's hire my friend Konstantin Trinks to conduct Beethoven or Brahms or Wagner. You can't really fight that because he's German and he's conducting German repertoire all the time. And so like, I think I kind of realized that it's better for me to focus on these things. And also because I know lots of American composers directly, I can call them up and talk to them. And so I kind of now welcoming it. It's, but still it works okay because there's so many things that, like I always find there's a really interesting connection to Stravinsky because Stravinsky wrote so much of his music in the States.
Mm-hmm. And
you can kind of claim some of that ourselves somewhat, I think. And it fits really well with a lot of French repertoire and fresh, and then Copland fits very well with all of that too, because it's similar to school and transparency and anyway.
And then when we, of course it goes without saying that Stravinsky was ultimately an American citizen. So it was an American composer, which is I'm sure Russia and France both are irritated that we can claim he was also a French composer and a Russian composer. But when a non-industry person says, "Oh, American music," they're talking about Copland, Gershwin, Bernstein. Now more is the case. Florence Price and some other composers that have been
Well,
neglected.
they're talking about in Adams and Glass a bit,
Yeah.
and
Do you
maybe
find yourself
sometimes
now doing a
Barber,
lot of?
sometimes others. What?
Yeah. Do you find yourself now getting hired to do a lot of contemporary, like freshly written stuff?
Um,
American?
not yet American. No, not so much. I mean, and I think that's one of my kind of goals is to become the person that can introduce a lot of things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, for instance, I'm working on a piece right now by you might know him, Avner Dorman.
I only know the name. Yeah.
He's a really great. I mean, he's American Israeli. I mean, he lives there in Pennsylvania, and he's been in the States for I don't know 30 years, most of his life. But um, and I love his music, and I think it's got a great American sound to it. He's Israeli. He was born in Israel, but I mean, he can fit in our American school fine, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's been nice. I mean, 2020 has sucked pretty bad, but one of the great things has been that it seems like this is a time when conductors and orchestras and performers are looking at music by a lot more women and people of color. And so I think we're getting to see a lot more variety in the music that we choose from.
Absolutely. Yeah, who are you interested in these days, especially?
Well, I'm working with a university orchestra now mostly, and I haven't had a professional conducting gig since January, which is a bummer, and that was a pops program.
Nobody has. Almost
Right,
nobody
nobody has.
has.
Yeah, I don't feel bad. I'm not falling behind. It's the way it is. And I've had a couple of things lined up, and they keep getting pushed. So I
Yeah,
think
of course.
next
Me
season
too.
will be
Me
pretty
too.
busy for me. But in the meantime, while I've got this downtime, the only orchestra I'm conducting is my university orchestra, and we're cut down. So I've had to find music for like a very specific size, instrumentation, and ability level. And so I've been looking at a lot of really young composers, namely like graduate students and stuff. And I found a couple of people that are getting their PhDs in North Texas or Indiana, these various schools, and they're talented. And I think in the future will be well-known composers, but right now they are just anxious to get their stuff performed, and they're willing to write for or cut down a piece that they've written. Well, if I called John Adams and I said, could you like break down one of your masterpieces for like 24 people? I think he would say either no or yeah for $1 million. But when you call your friend of a friend who's a graduate student somewhere, they're like happy to do it.
Of course.
So that's what I'm doing. And I've been writing arrangements too. I've been taking big pieces and cutting them down for single winds and small string sections. And
there's a lot of arrangements by a gentleman named Cliff Colnott. You know the name?
In Chicago, right? Chicago.
Yeah, and he's quite willing to share them if you ask.
Yeah, maybe I will.
If you ask, I have his email address somewhere. I can look it up for you if you want. Just ask me if you're interested. He sent me like a Sacra, and he sent me a host planets, but for like 12 players or something.
Wow, you got pretty good players, I think.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy.
You probably know Yoon Jae Lee in New York, who has reduced all the Mahler symphonies. He's writing a lot of reductions now of different pieces.
I don't know. Who's that?
We'll exchange emails then.
Please do that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a conductor in New York who I met, was there while you and I were both there. So it's maybe just bad luck that you didn't cross paths with him, but he lately has been writing a lot of reductions, and he's reduced all the Mahler symphonies and lots of other big pieces like that. So
wow.
Not for 12 people, but for 25 or 30, you could,
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. I also think it's one thing I'm really keen on at the moment. 2021 is a big Stravinsky year. It's 50 years since he passed away in New York City.
Yes, yeah.
And so it's a big year to do Stravinsky. So
I'll be doing the suites for small orchestra because that's basically my ensemble.
Yeah, I mean, we had a reading the other night with a socially distant small orchestra, 15 players. We did the Dumbarton Oaks.
Okay, great.
And we did Copeland Appalachian Spring in Kreuzberg over there in a nice studio we rent. And it's so cool because here in Berlin, you can, like right now in Corona times, I have a couple friends. Actually, I have a double bassist friend here, Rosie Salvucci, who's like kind of putting together orchestras every so often. And And we're actually already working on some other projects for the new year, and even a recording project. So.
Oh, and are these orchestras just reading orchestras for having a good time and keeping your chops up, or are you actually like making videos and somehow selling?
No, I don't really need videos, thankfully, anymore. But they're really just for opportunities to play, to make music, you know.
Yeah.
And really for the freelancers, these young freelancers that are out of work, and just it'd be nice to, you know, some of them are still in school, but most of them are out. I mean, it's you know how it's like in New York, and it's like here in Berlin. There's so many players, so many freelance players,
Yeah.
great players. They just want to play. And so, for instance, we did the Copeland Appalachian Spring, the smaller version, and we did Dunbar and Oaks. And I mean, a lot of these players, some of them have had in the past contracts with DSO Berlin and Staatskapelle and Konzerthaus, and so I don't know. It's just a way to keep busy and a way to keep active.
Sure.
And for me, yeah, it was a good way to like kind of go through those two pieces again just the other night, because I'm gonna record those in the new year, and so properly, and so it was nice to just touch on them again.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I did a program once with Dunbar and Oaks and Appalachian Spring. Those pieces complement each other really well.
Yeah, they do. They fit well. I mean, I think Copeland and Stravinsky work really well together.
Yeah.
You know, they're both so transparent and different, but also very interesting rhythmically. You know, very. I mean, definitely Copeland wouldn't sound the same without his influence by Stravinsky. I don't think. You know.
No, and they both studied in Paris for a bit, or rather, Copeland studied there, but they must have met in Paris a few times.
They did. They met at Boulanger's classes. They did. Yeah.
Not a surprise.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. And the Copeland was really her prize student. So.
Yeah, you know, I'm studying her sister right now, Lily Boulanger, and I don't know if you know her music, but she is remarkable. She was the better composer of the two sisters, but she died when she was 24. So it's pretty tragic.
You could do that music at the university, maybe with the chorus or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I might. I mean, last year I did a piece with the University of Colorado Orchestra, and then with the Astoria Symphony. It was my last concert with the Astoria Symphony. I did both of her last two tone poems, the Soir Triste and the Du Matin du Printemps, the Spring Morning piece. Did them back to back. They're meant to go together, and they're not performed together very often. But when you perform them back to back, it's pretty powerful.
I'm sure she's an amazing composer. I've just listened to some things on Spotify and stuff, but I was amazed.
I haven't conducted any of her choral pieces, but she wrote a lot of big choral orchestral things that I'm dying to one of these days.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I want to do that too. That's amazing. That's really cool. That would be fun to pair up with Copeland or Stravinsky even. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. Now, I don't know if Stravinsky knew Lily Boulanger, but he certainly knew Nadia pretty well. And so who knows? Yeah, if people have asked me this before, I'm curious what you'll say when you, if you could transport yourself to any time and place in history, where would it be? For me, it would be Paris, 1920s. I already told you Paris is my favorite city. And then the people who were hanging out in Paris at that time, oh my goodness, can you imagine?
Yeah, I can't imagine. I don't know. Boy, I don't know if I have a good answer to that question, but I think, yeah. I mean, I think it must have been, I would have been amazed to have met Stravinsky, you know. That's just incredible. Christoph Escherbach's met Stravinsky a couple times in the States, you know, and some people like, and I know an agent that's met Nadia Boulanger.
Oh, wow.
Several times in London and stuff. It's like, wow, this is incredible. But you know, we're living in our times too. I mean,
yeah,
I guess they'll be saying that about John Adams in 50 years, you know.
Who knows? They may say San Francisco in the 2000s or Berlin in the 2020s. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. So you have to remind me about San Antonio. You're from San Antonio originally.
I mostly grew up in San Antonio. My dad was in the Air Force. You know, San Antonio is a big Air Force town. So I moved a little bit, but I was born in San Antonio, and then we moved away, and then we came back. But I did most of my, schooling in San Antonio. Although, then I moved to California for my master's, and then I moved to Germany, and then I moved to New York, and now I've lived more out of Texas than in Texas. And,
oh wow! Yeah.
I've told this to people before. I'm like, if people go like, what are you? How do you identify? I'm a Texan, but I almost feel like not a Texan, and it's a weird feeling.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, you moved away from Texas when you were how old about?
23.
Oh
And
wow. See, I moved when I
so
was 28, I think. Yeah.
yeah, well, you must be, I'm not going to out your age. I don't know how old you are, but at a certain point, you will realize I've been out of Texas longer than I've been in it. And I actually feel like I feel more at home in New York City than in Texas in some ways,
Sure.
or in Berlin for that matter. And it's kind of bizarre because Texas is home, but I don't really feel at home there anymore. And I
But
haven't
do you
lived in
still
San
go?
Antonio since 1991. It's been a long
Oh
time.
wow.
Yeah.
Did you like grow up on Lackland Air Force Base or something like that?
Close by. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
born at Lackland Air Force Base.
See, I was like, I gotta ask that question. I had a Boy
Yeah.
Scout troop that stayed overnight there one weekend when I was a kid or something.
Yeah. No, I was born at the hospital in Lackland. And then in high school, we lived on the other side of town outside of Randolph Air Force Base.
Sure.
But that lifestyle suited me as a kid. I didn't have any choice. I moved wherever my dad got stationed. And then as an adult, I started doing that. Even, I went to college at Texas State University, and then I went to UCLA. Then I thought it'd be fun to live in Berlin. Then I moved to New York. Then
Yeah, you're adventurous, man. You're a really adventurous guy. Amazing.
chasing opportunities. And sometimes I wonder if I should have just stayed in one place, but
No, why? No, and like all this, what you did at Queens, I thought was just incredible. I was always like, wow. I was always amazed by that whole
oh,
enterprise you created there.
it was a lot. It was a lot of work. It was mostly just so I could get podium time and just do something musical. And it ended up being one of the best things to launch my career in a certain way. So
Yeah, you did a lot. You did a lot. You were busy.
ton of concerts. Well, I asked, I had the opportunity to meet Pekka Salonen in LA when he was the music director of the LA Phil. And I told the story on another episode, so audience will just have to bear with me. I said, Maestro, how do you get your international conducting career started? And he said, easy. You just enter a big conducting competition and win first place. And I was like, oh, is there a second way? Like, what's the other way? And he goes, the other way is to start your own ensemble and just start giving concerts. So I took that advice. Yeah. I took both the advices, but I, wasn't able to get in and win international connecting competitions in the 90s.
Well, there's other ways, of course, but I think there's no one perfect way. There's no one way that's a surefire way. I think the main thing is diligence, and not giving up and willing to just keep going.
As you know, you're doing very well now, but as you know, it's a tough road, and probably many times over the years you thought like maybe I should just do something else. But I've been, professionally conducting for about 20 years. And in those 20 years, I've seen a lot of conductors come and go and quit.
Sure.
And so just by staying in the game, ultimately, at first your resume is small, your connections. I tell young conductors who ask me for advice, I say like, connections are really important. They go, well, I don't have any connections. So start making them and be patient.
Yes.
You're not going to have a bunch of connections in 1 year, but in 10 years, you will.
Yeah. I mean, it's so much about networking and meeting people, and it's not unfair that way either. I don't think it's, a lot of people I met a young conductor recently here in Europe that said to me, I told him, of course, we all would agree. You have to become a great musician. You have to become a very accomplished musician that can conduct well with a good technique and all these kinds of musical things, of course. Ultimately, absolutely important. But if it's just like a composer, if your composer is composing the most amazing music alone in a room somewhere and nobody knows about it, it doesn't do any good, So you have to find a way to network, and you have to find a way to get your name out there, and you have to, I always call it playing the game. You got to play the game and get your name out there and write people and introduce yourself to people and ask people to meet them for a coffee. And you have to do that a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not necessarily why I set up this show, but it's nice to have coffee with you.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you set aside a little time for me. Thanks a lot.
I want to come meet you for a real coffee sometime so we can really talk, or maybe a beer.
Yeah. Well, with any luck, I'll be passing, I come to Europe every summer, and this 2020 I didn't get to, but next year I plan to be in Europe, and I'll see if I can't make an effort to pass through Berlin.
Come, please, please. Yeah, send me a note, please. We should get on, and we have to get each other's phone number. We should be on WhatsApp or something.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. I'm going to say goodbye for now.
Great to see you, Silas. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Cheers. Ciao, ciao.